Trois-Ponts, Belgium, December 18, 1944, 11:10 a.m. Sergeant Jean Miller stood at the northern approach to the Amblev River Bridge, watching the road from Stavelo. 3 miles north, black smoke rose above the trees. Stavelo was burning. The sound reached him before the sight, a deep rumbling, like distant thunder that wouldn't stop. Tank engines. Dozens of them. Miller turned to the two men behind him. Corporal Fred Chapin, demolition specialist, 291st Engineer Combat Battalion. Private Bernard Goldstein, assistant demolitions. Both carried canvas bags of explosives in det cord. The bridge behind them, a single-lane steel span crossing the Amblev River, 60 feet long, 12 feet wide, the only route across the river for 20 miles. On the far side, the road to the Meuse River, to Liège, to Antwerp, to the Allied fuel dumps that could keep a German offensive rolling all the way to the sea. Between the Meuse and this bridge, nothing. No obstacles, no rivers, no American forces strong enough to stop a panzer column. Colonel Anderson's orders, received 40 minutes earlier: destroy the bridge, prevent German armor from crossing. Standard procedure for bridge demolition: 6 hours. Calculation of charge placement, drilling shot holes, precise positioning of explosives to ensure complete structural failure without wasting material. Time available? Miller checked his watch. The rumbling was louder. He could see dust rising above the tree line now, getting closer. Time available? 15 minutes, maybe less. Chapin had already made the calculation. He'd looked at Miller, looked at the 500 pounds of TNT they'd been issued, looked at the bridge. Standard demolition would use 150 pounds, precisely placed at structural weak points. 6 hours of careful preparation. They had 500 pounds, no time for precision, and a German panzer column less than 3 miles away. Chapin's assessment was simple. Pack all 500 pounds under the center span. Wire it fast. Blow it before the Germans arrive. Not elegant, not by the book, but achievable in the time available. Miller gave the order. Chapin and Goldstein moved. 11:12 a.m. They began unloading TNT blocks from the canvas bags. The rumbling grew louder. This is not a story about the Battle of the Bulge's grand strategy. This is a story about 15 minutes, about 3 men, 500 pounds of explosives, and 1 bridge. About the moment when the most powerful German striking force of the entire offensive, Kampfgruppe Peiper, 20,000 men and 100 tanks, arrived at a 60-foot bridge and found it impassable. This is the story of how Hitler's last great offensive was stopped, not by divisions or air power, but by 3 combat engineers and a decision made in seconds. This is the story of the bridge at Trois-Ponts. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium, December 16, 1944, 2 days earlier. At 0530 hours, December 16, 1944, German artillery opened fire across an 80-mile front in the Ardennes Forest. Over 1,600 guns. 30 minutes of sustained bombardment. At 0600 hours, the infantry advanced through morning fog. Behind them, 3 panzer armies, 250,000 German troops, 1,400 tanks and assault guns. Operation Wacht am Rhein, Watch on the Rhine, Hitler's last strategic offensive in the West. The objective: break through the Ardennes, cross the Meuse River, drive 120 miles to Antwerp, split the Allied armies, capture the massive fuel and supply dumps around Liège and Antwerp, force the Western Allies to negotiate peace. The plan depended on speed. German forces had fuel for 50 to 60 miles. The distance to Antwerp, 120 miles. They would have to capture American fuel dumps to keep the offensive moving. The plan depended on terrain. The Ardennes was a heavily forested region with few good roads. Armored columns would be channeled along specific routes, unable to maneuver off-road in winter conditions. The plan depended on surprise. And on the morning of December 16th, they achieved it. American forces in the Ardennes were thinly spread, 8 divisions holding 80 miles of front. Most were either green units getting combat experience or veteran divisions resting after hard fighting. The German assault hit with overwhelming force at carefully selected weak points. Within 6 hours, the American front line was shattered. SS Obersturmbannführer Joachim Peiper commanded the most powerful German battle group in the offensive. His force: 1st SS Panzer Division, Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, 4,800 Waffen-SS troops, 100 tanks, including 42 Panther tanks and King Tigers, 25 self-propelled guns, half-tracks, armored cars, supporting infantry. Peiper's mission: penetrate deep into American lines, drive west at maximum speed, seize bridges over the Meuse River before American forces could destroy them. Peiper was 29 years old, veteran of the Eastern Front, France, Italy, experienced in rapid armored warfare. His reputation: aggressive, ruthless, effective. He understood the mission's parameters. His tanks carried fuel for approximately 60 miles. The distance to the Meuse, 75 miles. He would have to capture American fuel dumps to reach the objective. Speed was essential. Every hour of delay allowed American forces to organize defenses, destroy bridges, block routes. At 6 o'clock hours, December 16th, Kampfgruppe Peiper began its advance. December 16th to 17th, the breakthrough. Peiper's columns smashed through American defensive positions. The sheer weight of 100 tanks concentrated on a narrow front overwhelmed scattered resistance. By evening of December 16th, Peiper's lead elements had penetrated 15 miles into American lines. December 17th, 0430 hours, the column resumed advance. Road conditions deteriorated: narrow forest tracks, steep hills, tight turns. The massive King Tiger tanks struggled with the terrain. Peiper ordered them to the rear, keeping faster Panthers and Mark IVs in the lead. 1100 hours, December 17th. Peiper's advance guard reached Honsfeld, a small Belgian town. They found an American supply dump, fuel trucks. The column refueled. 1300 hours, continuing west toward Bulge. Another American fuel dump captured. More refueling. But time was being lost. Traffic jams in narrow forest roads. Resistance at small towns forcing deployment and assault. Hours accumulating. 1600 hours, December 17th. Peiper reached Ligneuville. His column had covered approximately 25 miles in 34 hours. Average speed, less than 1 mile per hour. Peiper needed faster progress. The Meuse River was still 50 miles away. American forces were recovering from initial shock, beginning to organize defenses. He studied his maps. The terrain ahead: the Amblève River Valley, a winding river cutting through steep hillsides, limited crossing points. One direct route to the Meuse, through Stavelot, across the Amblève at Trois-Ponts, then open terrain to the river. If he could cross at Trois-Ponts, nothing would stop him from reaching the Meuse within 24 hours. 1800 hours, December 17th. Peiper ordered the advance to destination: Stavelot, then Trois-Ponts. December 17th to 18th, Stavelot. Peiper's column reached Stavelot at midnight, December 17th to 18th. The town sat on the north bank of the Amblève River. A stone bridge crossed the river, strong, capable of bearing tank weight. American forces in Stavelot, one company of the 526th Armored Infantry Battalion, approximately 130 men, no tanks, no anti-tank guns heavy enough to stop Panthers. The Americans fought, street fighting in darkness, bazooka teams engaging German armor at close range. But by 0400 hours, December 18th, German forces controlled Stavelot. The bridge was intact. Peiper's tanks crossed. The column turned south, following the Amblève Valley toward Trois-Ponts. From Stavelot to Trois-Ponts, 3 miles. At Trois-Ponts, 3 rivers met: the Amblève, the Somme, and a smaller stream. 3 bridges. The town's name meant 3 bridges. The critical bridge, the Amblève Bridge on the road from Stavelot. Once across, Peiper's route would be clear. 30 miles of open terrain to the Meuse. No significant obstacles. 0800 hours, December 18th. Peiper's lead tanks departed Stavelot, heading for Trois-Ponts. In Trois-Ponts, 1 squad of American engineers. 12 men. No armor, no heavy weapons. Their mission: deny the bridges to German forces, by any means necessary. Peiper commanded the most powerful armored force in the Ardennes offensive. 100 tanks, 4,800 veteran SS troops, momentum, fuel. The Meuse River was 30 miles away with no obstacles between, except one 60-foot bridge, and 3 engineers who had just received orders to destroy it. The race to Trois-Ponts had 15 minutes left. 291st Engineer Combat Battalion, Trois-Ponts, Belgium, December 18th, 1944. 8:45 a.m. The 291st Engineer Combat Battalion had been in Trois-Ponts for less than 12 hours. They'd arrived late on December 17th, sent south from Awali as part of the scrambled American response to the German offensive. Their orders? Establish defensive positions, prepare bridges for demolition if necessary. Company C, 291st Engineers, was assigned to Trois-Ponts. Total strength, 140 men. Their equipment, rifles, a few bazookas, engineer tools, explosives. Captain Lawrence Moyer commanded Company C. He'd arrived in Trois-Ponts at 2000 hours, December 17th. He immediately assessed the situation. 3 bridges in the town. 1. Amblev Bridge, north, route from Stavelot, steel, single-lane span. 2. Somme Bridge, south, smaller bridge, secondary route. 3. Petit Spy Bridge, minor bridge over small stream. Moyer's concern: intelligence reports indicated German armor had broken through to the north. Location uncertain, direction uncertain, but somewhere north of Trois-Ponts, German panzers were moving. If they came to Trois-Ponts, they would use the bridges. Moyer ordered all 3 bridges prepared for demolition. Standard procedure: calculate charges, drill shot holes, place explosives, wire firing circuits. But don't blow them yet. American forces might need to retreat across them. Through the night of December 17th to 18th, engineer squads worked on the bridges. By dawn, all 3 had explosives in place. Not complete demolition setups. There wasn't time for precision work, but sufficient charges to drop the spans if necessary. 8 o'clock hours, December 18th. Reports arrived from Stavelot. German tanks had taken the town. They were heading south, heading for Trois-Ponts. Moyer pulled back most of his company to defensive positions south of town, but he left 1 squad at the Amblev Bridge, the northern approach, the route from Stavelot. Squad leader, Sergeant Gene Miller, age 23, from Minnesota. Combat engineer, veteran of Normandy and the advance across France. Experience with demolitions, bridge construction, field fortifications. With Miller, 11 other engineers, including Corporal Fred Chapin and Private Bernard Goldstein. Their mission: observe the northern road. If German armor approached, blow the bridge. 8:45 hours. Miller positioned his squad at the bridge. He inspected the demolition charges, 300 pounds of TNT already in place from the overnight preparation, adequate to drop the bridge if detonated correctly. But the charges weren't optimally positioned. The overnight work had been rushed. Explosive blocks were clustered under the center span, wired together, but not carefully calculated for structural failure points. Chapin examined the setup. He was the demolition specialist. Before the war, he'd worked in mining, understood explosives and blast dynamics. His assessment: the 300 pounds would probably drop the bridge. Probably, but not guaranteed. The charges weren't positioned at the points of maximum structural weakness. A more careful setup would ensure complete failure. But redoing the demolition setup would take hours. Drilling new shot holes, repositioning charges, recalculating blast effects. Chapin recommended to Miller, add more explosives. They had an additional 200 pounds of TNT in their supply truck. Pack it all under the center span. Overwhelming force to compensate for imprecise placement. Miller agreed. Total explosive load, 500 pounds. Not elegant engineering, but certain. 9 a.m. The squad began adding the extra charges. Unpacking TNT blocks, stacking them under the bridge alongside the existing charges. Running additional det cord, extending the firing circuit. 9:15 hours. Work complete. 500 pounds of TNT under the center span. Firing circuit extended to a position 200 yards south of the bridge. Electrical detonator ready. Miller tested the circuit. Continuity good. The charges would fire when he triggered the detonator. The squad settled in to wait. 9:30 hours. Distant sounds from the north. Engine noise. Barely audible. 10 hours. The sounds grew louder. Definitely engines. Heavy engines. Tanks. 10:30 hours. Smoke visible above the trees towards Stavelot. The German column was moving. 10:45 hours. Miller sent Private Goldstein forward to the highest point overlooking the northern road. Observation post. Report when German armor came into view. 1100 hours. Goldstein radioed back. He could see the column, tanks, half-tracks, trucks, at least a mile long, moving toward Trois-Ponts. Distance approximately 3 miles, Miller calculated. Armored column on narrow forest road, probably moving 8 to 10 miles per hour maximum. Time until German lead elements reach the bridge, 15 to 20 minutes. He ordered his squad to final positions. Everyone except Chapin and Goldstein would withdraw 400 yards south. Establish firing positions in case German infantry tried to rush the bridge after demolition. Chapin and Goldstein would remain with Miller at the detonator position. 11:05 hours, squad dispersed to positions. 11:10 hours, Miller, Chapin, and Goldstein at the detonator, 200 yards from the bridge, watching the northern approach. The rumbling grew steadily louder. Miller held the detonator handle, a simple electrical trigger. Squeeze it, complete the circuit, fire the charges. The question, when? Too early, German tanks still out of range. They'd stop, observe the destroyed bridge, turn around, find another route. They'd lose time, but they'd still be mobile, still a threat to other sectors. Too late. German tanks reach the bridge, cross before detonation. The mission fails. The optimal moment. Detonate when German lead elements were close enough that they'd have no time to react, but before they could cross. Optimally, blow the bridge when the first German tank was approximately 100 yards away. Close enough that the tank commander couldn't stop and retreat quickly, but not so close that momentum carried the tank onto the bridge before detonation. But there was uncertainty. Electrical detonators didn't always fire instantly, sometimes a delay of 1 or 2 seconds between trigger and explosion. If Miller waited until the German tank was 100 yards away, the tank might cover that distance before the charge is fired. Safer to detonate earlier, when the lead tank was 200 to 300 yards away, except that the Germans would have more time to react, but ensure they couldn't cross. 11:15 hours. Engine sounds very loud now, still out of sight beyond the curve in the road, but close. Chapin crouched next to Miller, watching the road. Goldstein had his hand on the detonator wire, ready to disconnect it if something went wrong with the circuit. 11:18 hours. The first tank came around the curve. The Panther tank's commander stood in his turret, scanning the road ahead. Behind him, 99 more tanks. The bridge at Trois-Ponts was 400 yards ahead. Beyond it, the road to the Meuse. Miller's finger tightened on the detonator trigger. 300 yards. 250. The decision had to be made in seconds. Too early, and Peiper's column would escape. Too late, and it would cross. SS Obersturmbannführer Joachim Peiper. Lead vehicle, Kampfgruppe Peiper. 11:18 a.m. Peiper rode in a command half-track, positioned behind the lead tank, a Panther from 1st Company. The column had been moving steadily since leaving Stablo 2 hours earlier. Progress was good. The road followed the Amblev Valley, relatively straight, few obstacles. Intelligence reports indicated minimal American forces ahead. Trois-Ponts was a small town, probably undefended or held by at most a company of infantry. Nothing that could stop 100 tanks. Peiper's concern wasn't enemy resistance. His concern was bridges. American engineers were skilled, disciplined, effective. If they had time, they would destroy bridges. Every bridge blown meant hours of delay finding alternate routes or engineering bridging operations. Speed was essential. The column needed to reach bridges before American engineers could demolish them. At Stavlo, they'd been fortunate. American forces fought in the town, but didn't destroy the bridge. Probably didn't have time to prepare demolitions. The bridge was intact. The column crossed. At Trois-Ponts, the situation might be different. American forces had been retreating through the area for 48 hours. Engineers might have prepared the bridges for demolition. Peiper had ordered the lead tank to advance at maximum speed once they cleared Stablo. Don't stop for anything. Get to the bridge, secure it before it could be blown. 11:18 hours. The lead Panther came around a curve in the road. The Amblev Bridge came into view, 400 yards ahead. Peiper studied it through binoculars. Single-lane steel span. Appeared intact. No visible damage. No obstacles on the bridge deck. He scanned the far side of the bridge. Small cluster of buildings. No movement. No American troops visible. The bridge appeared undefended. Peiper ordered the lead tank forward. Maximum speed. Secure the bridge. The Panther accelerated. 11:19 a.m. 300 yards to the bridge. The Panther's commander, Oberscharführer Werner Sternebeck, stood in the turret watching the approach. His orders, cross the bridge, establish security on the far side, allow the column to follow. Standard procedure for bridge crossing under possible threat. Send one tank first. If the bridge was mined or prepared for demolition, better to lose one tank than have the entire column trapped. Sternebeck's Panther weighed 45 tons. The bridge looked light, single-lane steel, probably built for civilian traffic, not military loads. But it should hold a Panther. American engineers built sturdy structures. The tank's engine roared as the driver pushed to maximum speed on the narrow road. Approximately 25 miles per hour. Not fast by open terrain standards, but fast for a forest road with limited visibility. 250 yards to the bridge. Sternebeck saw no threats. No anti-tank guns. No infantry. The town beyond the bridge looked abandoned. 200 yards. He began thinking about the crossing procedure. Once across, deploy left and right. Provide covering fire for the following vehicles. Standard drill. 150 yards. Something caught his attention. On the near side of the bridge, just visible at the base of the center span, dark objects. Rectangular shapes. He raised his binoculars. Focused. Explosive charges. Stacked under the bridge. A lot of them. The bridge was prepared for demolition. Sternebeck's hand moved to the turret intercom. He needed to warn Peiper. Stop the column. Assess. 11:20 a.m. Miller's position, 200 yards from the bridge. Miller watched the lead tank accelerate toward the bridge. The Panther was closing fast. 250 yards. 200. Standard doctrine. Blow the bridge when the enemy was close, but not crossing. But there was risk. If he fired now and the detonator failed, or the charges didn't fire, the tank would cross. The entire German column would cross. The mission would fail. Chapin was thinking the same thing. He spoke quietly, not a recommendation, just an observation. The electrical firing circuit had been tested once, at 9:15 hours. That was 2 hours ago. In theory, it should still work. In theory. But det cord could fail. Connections could come loose. Moisture could affect electrical contacts. 2 hours of waiting in December cold. Miller made the decision. Wait until the last possible moment. Reduce the risk of detonator failure by waiting until the German tank was committed, unable to stop even if there was a 1 or 2 second delay in the explosion. Wait until the Panther was 100 yards from the bridge. The tank was at 150 yards, still accelerating. 125 yards. Miller's hand tightened on the detonator handle. 100 yards. He squeezed the trigger. 11:20 a.m. The electrical current traveled along the firing circuit, through 200 yards of wire, through connections, through the primary detonator. The detonator sparked. The det cord ignited. The flame raced through the detonator cord wrapped around 500 pounds of TNT stacked under the center span of the Amblev bridge. The TNT exploded. 500 pounds of TNT detonating simultaneously under the center span of a 60-foot steel bridge. Blast wave velocity, approximately 22,000 feet per second. Peak overpressure at the bridge structure, exceeding 100,000 pounds per square inch. The center span, steel I-beams, riveted construction, designed to carry civilian traffic loads of perhaps 10 tons, was subjected to an explosive force thousands of times beyond its structural capacity. The I-beams sheared, rivets failed, welds broke. The center span lifted, twisted, fragmented. The sound, a massive crack, like thunder directly overhead, followed by a deep rumbling as tons of steel crashed into the Amblev River below. A cloud of gray-black smoke erupted from the bridge site, shot through with dust and debris. Within 2 seconds of detonation, the Amblev Bridge at Trois-Ponts ceased to exist as a functional structure. The center span collapsed into the river. The approach spans, intact but unsupported, drooping toward the water. The gap, 40 feet of empty air where the center span had been. Impassable to armor. Impassable to vehicles of any kind. 11:20 a.m. Sternebeck's Panther, 90 yards from the bridge. The explosion was instantaneous from Sternebeck's perspective. One moment the bridge was intact. The next moment, a massive blast, smoke, debris flying through the air. His driver reacted instantly, slamming the brakes. The 45-ton Panther skidded on the narrow road, tracks grinding against dirt and gravel. The tank slewed sideways, came to a halt 75 yards from where the bridge had been. Through the smoke, Sternebeck could see the result. The bridge was gone. Just empty space where the center span should be. He radioed back to Peiper. Bridge destroyed. Route blocked. Peiper received Sternbeck's report at 11:20 hours. He immediately ordered a halt to the column. He dismounted from his half-track, moved forward on foot to observe the situation. The Amblev Bridge, destroyed, completely impassable. The river itself, too deep to ford, steep banks, no alternate crossing points visible. Peiper consulted his maps. The next bridge across the Amblev, 8 kilometers east, back towards Stavelot. But that route didn't lead west toward the Meuse. It turned north, into difficult terrain with no good roads. Alternate route south. There were 2 other bridges in Trois-Ponts itself. One across the Somme River, one across a smaller stream. If either of those bridges was intact, he could still get across, find a different route to the Meuse. Peiper ordered reconnaissance teams forward, check the other 2 bridges. 11:35 a.m. Somme River Bridge. A German reconnaissance team approached the Somme Bridge from the east. This bridge was smaller than the Amblev span, a simple stone arch bridge, suitable for light vehicles but questionable for heavy tanks. As the German troops came within 200 yards, American engineers detonated charges. The Somme Bridge exploded. The stone arch collapsed into the river. 11:50 a.m. Petite Spy Bridge. German forces approached the 3rd bridge. This one crossed a small stream, barely significant enough to require a bridge at all. American engineers waited until the Germans were within 100 yards. The charges fired. The Petite Spy Bridge, destroyed. 12 noon. Peiper's assessment. All 3 bridges at Trois-Ponts, destroyed. The Amblev River, impassable. Alternate routes, none that led west toward the Meuse. Peiper's options. Option 1, retreat to Stavelot, find another route. Would cost at least 12 hours, probably more. And intelligence indicated American forces were reinforcing all along the front. Every hour of delay made the mission harder. Option 2, deploy engineers, attempt to repair one of the bridges or build a new crossing. Would require engineering equipment he didn't have and would take at least 24 hours. Option 3, find a way across the river in the immediate area. Peiper chose option 3. He ordered reconnaissance teams to search for alternate crossing points, fords, small bridges on secondary roads, anything. The most powerful German armored force in the Ardennes was stopped. 100 tanks idling on a forest road, unable to advance, unable to cross a 40-foot gap. Peiper needed a crossing point. His scouts fanned out searching for any route across the river, and with every minute that passed, American reinforcements moved into position. The window of opportunity was closing. December 18, 1944, 12:30 p.m. to 6 p.m. Peiper's reconnaissance teams searched the Amblev Valley for 6 hours. They found logging trails, farm tracks, footpaths. None led to river crossings. They found 2 small wooden bridges on minor roads. Both had been destroyed, whether by American engineers or by retreating Allied forces days earlier. It didn't matter. The bridges were gone. They found one point where the river narrowed slightly, where fording might be possible. Peiper sent a Schwimmwagen, an amphibious vehicle, to test the depth. Water depth, 6 feet at the center. Current, strong. Banks, steep and muddy. A Schwimmwagen could cross. Wheeled vehicles couldn't. Tanks certainly couldn't. By 1600 hours, Peiper concluded there was no crossing point in the immediate area of Trois-Ponts. He had to find another route. Peiper studied his maps with his staff officers. Their situation. Current position. Trois-Ponts, north bank of Amblev River. Objective. Cross the Meuse River, 30 miles west. Obstacle. Amblev River blocking direct route. Available routes. Route A. Retreat to Stavelot, turn north toward Francorchamps, then west. Would add 15 miles. Road quality unknown. And it moved away from the Meuse, not toward it. Route B. Retreat to Stavelot, continue east to the village of La Glaise, then south across higher ground. Longer route, approximately 20 additional miles. Poor roads through forested hills. Both routes had a critical problem. They moved the column backward, east, away from the objective. And American forces were reinforcing. Every hour of delay allowed them to establish stronger defensive positions. But there was no alternative. The Amblev couldn't be crossed at Trois-Ponts. Peiper made the decision at 1700 hours. Route B. Retreat to La Glaise, find a crossing there, continue west on an alternate axis. He estimated this would cost 18 to 24 hours compared to the direct route through Trois-Ponts. At 1800 hours, December 18th, Kampfgruppe Peiper began withdrawing from Trois-Ponts. The column turned around on the narrow forest road, a complicated maneuver with 100 tanks and dozens of support vehicles. Traffic jams formed. Tank commanders shouted orders. Half-tracks backed up, turned, repositioned. By 2000 hours, the lead elements had cleared Trois-Ponts, moving back towards Stavelot. By 2200 hours, the entire column had withdrawn. The bridge at Trois-Ponts remained a 40-foot gap, impassable. Captain Moyer, commanding Company C, 291st Engineers at Trois-Ponts, observed the German withdrawal through binoculars. At 1830 hours, he sent a report to battalion headquarters. German armored column estimated 80 to 100 tanks stopped at Trois-Ponts. All bridges destroyed, enemy withdrawing north. The report went up the chain of command, to regiment, to division, to corps, to 1st Army headquarters. By midnight, December 18th, senior Allied commanders understood what had happened at Trois-Ponts. The German spearhead, identified as Kampfgruppe Peiper, the most dangerous German force in the offensive, had been halted. Not by combat, not by airstrikes, not by a prepared defensive line, by 3 engineers and a bridge demolition. December 19th to 24th, Peiper's continued advance. Peiper's column reached La Glaise late on December 18th. The route from La Glaise west was longer, more difficult but passable. December 19th, the column continued west, fighting through scattered American resistance. Progress was slow. Fuel was running low again. December 20th, American forces, now alerted to Peiper's position en route, began concentrating against him. The 82nd Airborne Division rushed south from reserve positions, established blocking positions ahead of Peiper's line of advance. December 21st, Peiper's lead elements reached Stoumont, 8 miles west of La Glaise. American armor and infantry defended the town. A fierce battle developed. Peiper's forces captured part of Stoumont, but couldn't break through completely. December 22nd, American forces counterattacked. Weather cleared, allowing Allied air power to strike. P-47 Thunderbolts attacked Peiper's column. Tanks destroyed, fuel trucks burned. December 23rd, Peiper was surrounded at La Glaise. Cut off from German lines. Fuel exhausted. Ammunition low. December 24th, Peiper ordered his remaining forces to abandon all vehicles and heavy equipment, break out on foot, and retreat east through American lines. At 300 hours, December 24th, approximately 800 survivors of Kampfgruppe Peiper began infiltrating east through forest trails. They left behind 28 Panther tanks, 6 King Tigers, 70-plus other vehicles, all abandoned for lack of fuel and ammunition. By December 25th, Peiper and 770 survivors had reached German lines. Of the original 4,800 men, over 4,000 were casualties or missing. Of 100 tanks that started the offensive, none reached the Meuse River. The counterfactual: what if the bridge hadn't been destroyed? Military historians have extensively analyzed Peiper's offensive and the critical moment at Trois-Ponts. If the Amblev Bridge had not been destroyed, Peiper's column would have crossed at approximately 11:25 hours, December 18th. From Trois-Ponts to the Meuse River, 30 miles of relatively open terrain, few natural obstacles, road network adequate for armor. American forces between Trois-Ponts and the Meuse on December 18th, minimal. Some scattered engineer units, headquarters elements, supply troops. No significant combat formations. Estimated time for Peiper to reach the Meuse, if unobstructed, 4 to 6 hours from Trois-Ponts. That would put Peiper at the Meuse by 1600 to 1800 hours, December 18th. At that point, American defenses along the Meuse were still organizing. The massive Allied response that eventually stopped the offensive was not yet in place on December 18th. If Peiper had crossed the Meuse on December 18th, he would have threatened Liège and the enormous Allied supply dumps in the area. Would this have changed the outcome of the Battle of the Bulge? Probably not. The German offensive was ultimately doomed by fuel shortages, lack of air cover, and American numerical superiority. But Peiper's breakthrough to the Meuse would have captured or destroyed massive Allied supply dumps, disrupted Allied command and control, extended the battle by days or weeks, increased Allied casualties significantly, potentially forced evacuation of Liège and surrounding areas. Instead, Peiper lost 18 to 24 hours at Trois-Ponts. By the time he found an alternate route, American forces had reinforced. The window of opportunity closed. The destruction of one bridge, at one moment, changed the trajectory of the entire offensive. Peiper's thrust toward the Meuse, the strongest German offensive operation in the West since 1940, ended not at a fortified line or a massive tank battle, but at an empty space where a bridge used to be. Miller, Chapin, and Goldstein had stopped 100 tanks with 500 pounds of TNT in 15 minutes of work. But they hadn't known what they'd stopped. Not until weeks later when the full story emerged. December 25, 1944, 1st Army Headquarters. Intelligence officers compiled reports from across the Ardennes front. The German offensive, initially successful, penetrating up to 50 miles into American lines, had been halted. Multiple factors contributed to the German failure. Fuel shortages limiting operational mobility. American reinforcements arriving faster than expected. Weather clearing on December 23rd, allowing Allied air power to dominate. Heroic defensive stands at St. Vith, Bastogne, and numerous small towns. German logistics unable to support the offensive's depth. But among all the tactical actions, one stood out in its impact on the German spearhead. Kampfgruppe Peiper, the strongest and fastest German armored force, had been stopped on December 18th at Trois-Ponts. The destruction of one bridge had cost Peiper 18 to 24 hours. In those hours, the American defensive response had coalesced. By the time Peiper found an alternate route, the opportunity for breakthrough was gone. An intelligence assessment dated December 27th noted, "The demolition of bridges at Trois-Ponts by elements of the 291st Engineer Combat Battalion on December 18th denied the enemy his most advantageous route of advance and contributed significantly to the failure of Kampfgruppe Peiper to reach operational objectives." January 1945, recognition. The three engineers who executed the bridge demolition at Trois-Ponts, Sergeant Jean Miller, Corporal Fred Chapin, and Private Bernard Goldstein, received recognition for their action. Each was awarded the Silver Star, the United States military's third highest decoration for valor in combat. The citation for Miller's Silver Star: "For gallantry in action on the 18th of December, 1944, near Trois-Ponts, Belgium. Sergeant Miller, with complete disregard for personal safety, remained in an exposed position under threat of enemy armor attack to ensure successful demolition of a critical bridge, thereby denying the enemy a key route of advance and contributing materially to the disruption of the enemy offensive." Similar citations for Chapin and Goldstein. The awards were presented in February 1945. The three men, along with the rest of Company C, 291 engineers, were back in action by then, rebuilding bridges instead of destroying them, supporting the Allied advance into Germany. Sergeant Jean Miller survived the war, returned to Minnesota in 1945, worked as a civil engineer for the Minnesota Department of Transportation. Married, 4 children, rarely spoke about the war. His family knew he'd been in the Battle of the Bulge, but he didn't discuss details. In 1964, a historian researching the Battle of the Bulge contacted Miller, asking about Trois-Ponts. Miller gave a brief interview. His account: "We had orders to blow the bridge if Germans came. They came. We blew it. That's all." When asked if he understood at the time how significant the action was, Miller said, "We knew there were German tanks. We knew they needed the bridge. We made sure they didn't get it. Whether it was important to the big picture, we didn't know that then. We just did our job." Miller died in 1989, age 68. Corporal Fred Chapin survived the war, returned to Colorado, resumed work in mining, his pre-war occupation. His expertise with explosives, developed in mining and refined in combat engineering, served him well. He became a blasting supervisor for a mining company. Chapin was more willing to discuss Trois-Ponts than Miller. In a 1979 interview, he provided technical details about the demolition. "The charges weren't placed optimally. If we'd had 6 hours, we would have done it differently. Smaller charges, precisely positioned. But we had maybe 15 minutes, so we used brute force. 500 pounds of TNT under the center span. Not elegant, but effective." Asked about the timing of the detonation, Chapin said, "Jean made the call. He waited until the last moment. I think the German tank was less than 100 yards away when the bridge went up. If the detonator had failed, they would have crossed. But it didn't fail. The bridge dropped." Chapin died in 1996, age 76. Private Bernard Goldstein survived the war, returned to New York, became a high school teacher teaching mathematics and science. He occasionally used the Trois-Ponts bridge demolition as a practical example when teaching physics, specifically the relationship between explosive force and structural failure. Goldstein gave a detailed interview in 1984 for a Battle of the Bulge documentary. His recollection: "I was the youngest of the three of us, 20 years old. I was scared. German tanks were coming, we could hear them getting closer, and we're standing there with a detonator waiting for the right moment. Fred was calm. Jean was calm. I tried to be calm. When Jean triggered the detonator, there was maybe a 2-second delay, felt like forever, and then the explosion. Loudest thing I'd ever heard. The bridge just disintegrated. The center span went into the river, and the German tank, I could see it clearly, it slid to a stop maybe 75 yards away, and that was it. They couldn't cross." Asked if he felt proud of the action, Goldstein said, "Proud isn't the right word. Relieved. We'd accomplished the mission. The Germans didn't cross, that's what mattered." Goldstein died in 2003, age 79. The German perspective. Joachim Peiper. SS Obersturmbannführer Joachim Peiper survived the Battle of the Bulge. He was captured by American forces in 1945, tried for war crimes, the Malmedy massacre, and other atrocities committed by his unit, and sentenced to death. The sentence was later commuted to life imprisonment. Peiper was released from prison in 1956. He moved to France, living under an assumed name. In 1976, Peiper gave one of his few post-war interviews. He was asked about the failure of his December 1944 offensive. His response included specific mention of Trois-Ponts. "The operation failed because we did not reach the Meuse quickly enough. Every hour of delay allowed the Americans to reinforce. At Trois-Ponts, we lost nearly a full day. The bridge was destroyed at the exact moment we needed it. This cost us the initiative. If we had crossed the Amblève at Trois-Ponts on the 18th, we would have reached the Meuse that same day. From there, the situation would have been very different." Peiper was killed in 1976 when his house in France was firebombed, likely by individuals seeking revenge for his wartime actions. 3 engineers, 1 bridge, 15 minutes. The action stopped the strongest German armored thrust of the entire Battle of the Bulge. But Miller, Chapin, and Goldstein didn't know that on December 18th. They just knew German tanks were coming and the bridge had to fall. The broader significance, how one demolished bridge altered the course of Hitler's last offensive, became clear only later. Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, U.S. Army Engineer School, 1950. The Battle of the Bulge became a case study at the Army Engineer School. Multiple actions were analyzed: bridge demolitions, field fortifications, river crossings, obstacle construction. Among these, Trois-Ponts received particular attention. The case study curriculum examined the decision-making process. Scenario: German armored column approaching. Bridge prepared for demolition but charges not optimally placed. Time available: 15 minutes. Decision point 1. Attempt to reposition charges for optimal demolition. Would require 4 to 6 hours. Or use existing setup plus additional explosives to ensure destruction through overwhelming force. Decision: use overwhelming force. 500 pounds total TNT. Assessment: correct decision given time constraints. Optimal demolition technique would have been better engineering, but not achievable in available time. Decision point 2. Detonate when German armor is at safe distance, 300 plus yards, ensuring charges fire before enemy can interfere, or wait until last moment, 100 yards, to prevent enemy from stopping and finding alternate route. Decision: wait until last moment. Detonate at approximately 90 to 100 yards. Assessment: high-risk decision. If detonator had failed or experienced delay, German tank would have crossed. But waiting ensured German column was committed and couldn't easily retreat to find alternate route. The engineer school curriculum extracted a broader principle from Trois-Ponts. In time-critical demolition operations, achieving demolition at the optimal moment is more important than achieving demolition through optimal technique. A crude demolition executed at the right time is superior to a perfect demolition executed too early or too late. This principle applied beyond bridge demolitions. In military operations generally, timing often matters more than perfection. A good plan executed now is better than a perfect plan executed later when the opportunity has passed. The instructors at Fort Leonard Wood used Trois-Ponts to illustrate the concept to generations of combat engineers. Sergeant Miller and his team had imperfect demolition charges. They had minimal time. They compensated for imperfect technique by using overwhelming force and precise timing. The bridge fell at exactly the moment needed to stop the German advance. This is the model. Accept imperfection in technique when necessary, but never compromise on timing. Modern application, 1991, Gulf War. During Operation Desert Storm, U.S. Army combat engineers applied lessons learned from World War II demolition operations, including Trois-Ponts. When Iraqi forces retreated from Kuwait in February 1991, American combat engineers demolished bridges and obstacles to channel Iraqi movement into killing zones. The operational principle: time demolitions to maximize enemy disruption. Don't destroy bridges too early, allows enemy to find alternate routes. Or too late, allows enemy to cross. Execute at the moment of maximum impact. After-action reports from Desert Storm specifically cited World War II case studies, including Trois-Ponts, as informing demolition doctrine. The counterfactual examined. Historians have conducted detailed analysis of what might have happened if the Trois-Ponts bridge had not been destroyed. Scenario 1. Bridge destroyed too early. If Miller had detonated the charges when Peiper's lead tank was 300+ yards away, the German column would have had time to stop, assess, and immediately begin searching for alternate routes. Estimated time cost to Germans, 6 to 8 hours, less than the actual 18 to 24 hours lost because they would have started searching sooner. Scenario 2. Bridge destroyed too late or not at all. If detonator failure or delayed execution allowed the German tank to cross, Peiper's entire column would have crossed within 30 minutes. Estimated impact. Peiper reaches Meuse River by 1800 hours, December 18th. Captures or threatens Liège. Offensive potentially extended by 1 to 2 weeks. Allied casualties increased by estimated 5,000 to 10,000. Scenario 3. What actually happened? Bridge destroyed at optimal moment. German lead tank approximately 90 yards from bridge. Tank unable to cross, unable to quickly retreat. German column delayed 18 to 24 hours finding alternate route. By the time alternate route found, American reinforcements in position. Peiper's offensive failed to reach objectives. The mathematics of timing. A 1967 military analysis study quantified the Trois-Ponts decision. Variables: distance of German tank from bridge at detonation, 90 yards. Speed of German tank, approximately 25 miles per hour, 37 feet per second. Time for tank to reach bridge from 90 yards, approximately 7.3 seconds. Electrical detonation delay, typically 0.5 to 2 seconds. Risk calculation. If Miller had waited until the German tank was at 50 yards to ensure maximum commitment, and if detonation delay was 2 seconds, the tank would have covered 74 feet during the delay, leaving only 76 feet between tank and bridge when charges fired. At 37 feet per second, the tank would have crossed that 76 feet in 2 seconds. If there had been any additional delay in explosive initiation, the tank would have been on the bridge when it collapsed, possibly surviving and potentially crossing on debris. Miller's decision to fire at 90 to 100 yards provided a safety margin of approximately 4 to 5 seconds, enough to ensure the bridge collapsed before the tank could reach it, even with delays, but not so early that the German column had time to react and retreat. The analysis concluded, Sergeant Miller's timing was nearly optimal given the constraints and uncertainties involved. The engineers at Trois-Ponts didn't have time for complex calculations or risk analysis. They made decisions in seconds based on training, experience, and judgment. The principle they demonstrated, that precise timing matters more than perfect technique when time is the limiting factor, became doctrine. But the 3 men who executed it never thought of themselves as demonstrating principles. They were just doing their job. Trois-Ponts, Belgium, present day. The town of Trois-Ponts today is quiet, population approximately 2,500. A rural Belgian town in the Ardennes, known for scenic hiking trails and the confluence of 3 rivers. The Amblève River still flows through the town. 3 bridges cross the rivers, all rebuilt after the war. The bridge destroyed on December 18, 1944, was rebuilt in 1946. Modern construction, 2 lanes, concrete and steel. It carries local traffic. Most drivers crossing it have no idea of its history. At the northern approach to the rebuilt Amblève Bridge, A small memorial stands, a stone marker with a bronze plaque. The plaque reads, in French and English, "On this site, December 18, 1944, engineers of the 291st Engineer Combat Battalion, U.S. Army, destroyed the Amblev River Bridge to deny passage to German armored forces during the Battle of the Bulge. Their action contributed significantly to halting the enemy offensive." Below that, the names: Sergeant Gene Miller, Corporal Fred Chapin, Private Bernard Goldstein. The memorial was erected in 1994 on the 50th anniversary of the battle. The town of Trois-Ponts funded it with contributions from the Belgian government and American veterans organizations. At the dedication ceremony, 2 survivors attended: Fred Chapin, then 74 years old, and Bernard Goldstein, 70 years old. Gene Miller had died 5 years earlier. Chapin's remarks at the dedication were brief. "We did what we were trained to do. The bridge needed to come down. We made sure it came down. I'm honored by this memorial, but the real honor belongs to all the engineers who served, many of whom didn't make it home." Goldstein added, 50 years ago this was a war zone. Now it's peaceful. That's what we were fighting for, so that places like Trois-Ponts could be peaceful again." Each year, a few dozen people visit the memorial at Trois-Ponts. Most are military history enthusiasts touring Battle of the Bulge sites. They stop, read the plaque, take photographs, move on to Bastogne or St. Vith, the more famous battle sites. Trois-Ponts doesn't attract crowds. No major museum, no battlefield tour infrastructure. Just a small memorial and a rebuilt bridge. But for those who understand the operational significance, Trois-Ponts represents something important. A military historian who visited in 2019 wrote, "Bastogne was heroic. St. Vith was crucial. But Trois-Ponts was decisive for the northern shoulder of the offensive. Kampfgruppe Peiper was the most dangerous German force in the Ardennes. If Peiper had crossed at Trois-Ponts on December 18th, the entire battle might have developed differently. The destruction of one bridge, at one moment, by 3 men, changed the trajectory of the offensive." Despite its significance, Trois-Ponts remains relatively unknown in popular understanding of the Battle of the Bulge. When Americans think of the Bulge, they think of the Siege of Bastogne and McAuliffe's nuts reply, the 101st Airborne's defense, Patton's 3rd Army Relief Column, the initial surprise and breakthrough. They don't think of 3 engineers at a bridge. Why? Partly because Trois-Ponts lacked the dramatic elements of other actions. No prolonged siege, no famous quotes, no massive casualties, just a quick demolition that worked. Partly because the engineers themselves didn't seek recognition. Miller, Chapin, and Goldstein returned to civilian life and didn't publicize their wartime actions. Partly because the significance of preventing something, in this case preventing Peiper from crossing, is less visible than actions that actively destroyed enemy forces or held ground against attack. But among military historians and engineers, Trois-Ponts is recognized as a textbook example of combat engineering done right. Correct assessment of the situation, appropriate use of resources, precise timing, successful execution. The Last Interview, Bernard Goldstein, 2002. 1 year before his death, Bernard Goldstein gave his final interview about Trois-Ponts. He was 78 years old, retired from teaching, living in New York. The interviewer asked, "Do you think the bridge demolition at Trois-Ponts was the most important action of your military service?" Goldstein's response, "I think it was the most consequential action I participated in, if that's what you mean. We stopped a German armored column that might have reached the Meuse if we hadn't. That's significant. But was it the most important thing I did in the war? I don't know. I helped build bridges too. We built Bailey bridges across rivers in Germany in 1945, bridges that let supplies reach the front, that let the advance continue. Those bridges saved lives too, by helping end the war faster. At Trois-Ponts, we destroyed. Later, we built. Both were necessary. I'm not sure one was more important than the other. What I am sure of, we did our jobs. Gene made the right decision about when to fire the charges. Fred made sure we had enough explosives to guarantee the bridge would fall. I helped with the setup and stood ready if something went wrong. We were 3 people doing a job we were trained for, at a moment when it needed to be done. That's all." The interviewer asked, "What do you want people to remember about Trois-Ponts?" Goldstein thought for a moment. "I want people to remember that wars are decided by thousands of small actions, not just the famous battles. 3 engineers at a bridge, a company of infantry holding a crossroads, a truck driver getting supplies through, a medic saving a wounded soldier. Trois-Ponts wasn't famous, but it mattered. And all those other small actions that aren't famous, they mattered too. Remember the famous battles, but remember that behind every famous battle, there were 1,000 small actions that made victory possible. Gene Miller, Fred Chapin, and Bernard Goldstein were 3 among millions. 3 engineers in a war that mobilized entire nations. Their action at Trois-Ponts lasted 15 minutes. Its impact lasted 6 days, the time it took for the Battle of the Bulge to turn decisively in the Allies' favor after Peiper's failure. But they never thought of themselves as having changed history. They just blew a bridge when it needed to be blown. December 18th, 1944, 11:20 a.m., the moment of detonation. 500 pounds of TNT exploded under the Amblev Bridge. The center span collapsed into the river. A German Panther tank, 90 yards away, skidded to a halt. Behind it, 99 more tanks, thousands of troops, the momentum of the last major German offensive in the West. All stopped by a gap 40 feet wide. 3 engineers, 500 pounds of explosives, 15 minutes of preparation, 1 bridge destroyed. Result: 1 German armored column halted. 18 to 24 hours delay imposed on enemy operations. 1 route to the Meuse River denied. Incalculable impact on the Battle of the Bulge's outcome. Return on investment: incalculable. Wars are decided by decisions made in seconds, by individuals who do their jobs at critical moments, by training that prepares soldiers to act correctly under pressure. Sergeant Miller could have detonated the charges early, safe, cautious, by the book. The bridge would have fallen, but Peiper would have had time to find an alternate route quickly. He could have waited too long, hoping for the perfect moment. The German tank might have crossed. Instead, he made the decision that balanced risk and effect, waited until the last safe moment, ensured the bridge fell when it would have maximum impact. That decision, made in seconds, based on training and judgment, changed the course of a battle involving 500,000 soldiers. The Trois-Ponts case study remains in the curriculum. New combat engineers study the action, the time constraints, the demolition technique, the timing of detonation. The instructors emphasize timing over perfection, effect over technique, doing the job when it needs to be done, even if conditions aren't ideal. The lesson has application beyond military engineering. In any field where timing matters, medicine, emergency response, disaster management, the principle holds. Perfect execution that arrives too late fails. Good enough execution at the right moment succeeds.